Really appreciate everybody taking time today. I'm just going to spend a minute here talking just a brief background update on Mayfield. I know you all know us, been around a long time, been investing for over 50 years, bunch of deals, some remarkable numbers, 500 and roughly 65 investments, bunch of M&A deals. We think the M&A market is heating up. Bunch of IPOs. We also hope that the IPO market is heating up as well. Stay tuned. These are the primary sectors we're investing in. We invest at seed, what we call inception stage, early stage, Series A, and we also have a growth vehicle. We call it our Select Fund that allows us to participate at Series B as well. So those are the three stages. Enterprise software, deep tech, human health, planet health are the main areas. We also announced an AI fund recently, and this is just a very simple way that we look at AI from an infrastructure full stack standpoint. And at a high level, we believe that the entire IT stack will go through a transformation, just as we saw during the cloud transformation, whereby each of these 5 layers of the cake stack, semis and systems, infrastructure, data and ops, middleware, and of course, the term now co-pilots, which essentially the SaaS application platforms that we all know today, will evolve into an AI first theme. We have a number of investments already in the sector. We're doing seed deals, we're doing Series A deals and Series B deals across the whole map. But I really want to get to our topic today, and I want to introduce 2 amazing speakers. One, John Sviokla, who I've just gotten to know through my friend Toby, who's also here today. John's got an amazing background. He was a professor at Harvard some years ago and actually was leading AI strategy in his professorship again years ago. So a prescient insight on AI many years ago, perhaps. He became head of innovation of a consulting firm called Diamond Technology that was acquired by PwC. He then integrated firms like Booz Allen into PwC and built something he called the Exchange, or they called the Exchange, which was this think tank. And I think this is an insight as to how John perhaps thinks about the world from a very strategic perspective. He spent time investigating how entrepreneurs, some of the largest entrepreneurs in the world, actually change markets. Something he wrote as a book, I think, called The Self-Made Billionaire, How Leaders Create Massive Value. Anyway, he's spent a lot of time, I think, listening and organizing how leadership and strategy comes together to change the world. AI perhaps is the momentum catalyst maker right now that we're going to spend time talking about, and John's going to help break down how we should be thinking about it. He's joined by Toby, who is a good friend. I've known back since the Motorola days when you were CIO there. You were at FedEx before that, driving innovation there. You went on to Aviva, you went on to American Express, you went on to Verizon, where you were head of innovation. You now have your own consulting firm, and just really thoughtful and strategic thinker about how IT leaders, CIOs, thoughtfully should be thinking about change and change management from a strategy standpoint. And you've been in the trenches, so when you offer advice, it always feels like you feel the pain. So both of you are great friends, speakers. Let me turn it over to you, John, to let you share your slides and content. If I've missed anything about your background, please offer that up. As far as the attendees go, everybody attending today, please use the chat bar to ask questions. We want this to be conversational. We only have an hour. But we will try to get through the content in a way that allows you to walk away with some takeaway concepts to work from. But ask your questions. John and Toby love to exchange here. So with that, John, let you take it away.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. So such a pleasure to be here. Had a chance to look at this topic of AI and how machines think and how people think and how that's different and what it means for economics and what it means for businesses and what it means for life for a long time now. Also joined by Paul Beyer. We're going to be Toby and I are going to be doing the presentation. He's my co-founder and as well here at GAI Insights. We're a research firm aimed at really understanding what are the implications of generative AI, what's going on in the marketplace, and what should business leaders take advantage of. I'm really interested in the practical, what's really happening, not the vendor push and not the hyperbole and stuff like that. I'd like to lay to rest kind of one thing right at the beginning, which is there's this whole set of things around what's it going to do to society, and do machines think, and are we going to lose control? Is it going to be Terminator? All that other stuff. This is not what this is about today. The one thing I have to say about that is, for me, planes fly, birds fly. They fly very differently. They don't have to. They don't have to do with each other. To me, machines think, or at least they process stuff, and humans think. And the worrying about the relationship to those two is like Boeing worrying about, are they going to infringe on birds? So I just don't see it. So that's the kind of top half. We're going to focus on the bottom half, which is what's really happening. What are we seeing in the marketplace? Since we started this firm in May, we've had the great good fortune of working with a bunch of AI leaders. And also, we review a lot of the news and so forth and try to really understand what's important. So anyway, that's the background. And I'm delighted to be here with my friend Toby. Toby, in addition to being a brilliant, one of the smartest guys on the planet, and super practical, I've lost a lot of money too on the golf course. So there you go. Toby, I don't know if you want to say anything else about your background. I think Emil kind of gave you the background. Good setup there.
So the only thing I would add is John is one of the top left brain, right brain guys. The thing that's missing out of his bio is he was a very successful sculptor, and in that domain, to actually be successful makes like the pyramid for pro golf look pointy, right? That's a really difficult domain to do that. So there's that. I had to add that.
Thanks, buddy. All right, great. So let's get into it. I'm going to say a few words at the beginning. I don't know, Camille, have we been able to do the poll or not, you think?
We're going to try to do the poll.
Okay, great. Should I pull it up? Yeah. All right.
Why don't you go ahead and start your slides, and then and if you want to ask your question live, because we were struggling to enable polling here for a second.
No problem. That's okay. All right. So let me share screen. Share screen. All right. Sharing screen right there. All right. Excellent. All right. Of course, this image was generated by generative AI. And the simple message here, I think, is that generative AI are power tools for knowledge work. And we'll get into that and a way to think about where they could be applied and how you can benchmark yourself as to how much you're doing in your organization. Why is this so important? Here we've got a nice Mid-Journey, thing that pulled together that is Socrates talking to a robot. What's the big deal here? Why did ChatGPT, as one of the generative AI platforms, go to 100 million users in 2 months, which you can see compared to other folks here, other innovations, is the fastest by far? I think it's very, very simple. 10 million people speak Python. 13 million people speak Java. Everybody speaks their own language. And you get to talk to the machine. So I remember back in the days of uppercase and lowercase and low code, no code, back all the way back to the 80s. And this is real low code, no code. People can actually talk to the machine in language. And I think that's a big deal. And of course, it's available everywhere, on our devices, like the whole routine. So, and I think it's a whole new paradigm, actually. Second thing is, unlike, and I was around, we had the first e-commerce course at Harvard Business School in 1995. And so I remember that whole thing. And, one of the guys who was at Yahoo did the Yahoo strategy as, his final project for our course and all that other stuff. It took a long time for the internet to take off. But you look at this and, back, let's call it 15, 18 months ago, generative AI comes on the scene. So who's adopted it? McDonald's has Ask Pickle that's sitting in the drive-thru in franchise ops. If you know anything about McDonald's, the vast majority of orders come through the drive-thru, and to put anything in the drive-thru in franchise ops is huge for them. Second, Walmart's already announced at the Consumer Electronics Show a couple weeks ago, shopping help. I'm having a Super Bowl party. Tell me what I need. I've got 5 guys, 4 girls. Like, what are we doing here? I can shop with my friends virtually. Store ops, I can actually ask questions. I can check out virtually. Mercedes and Volkswagen. Mercedes back in June, July. Volkswagen back at CES, just a couple of weeks ago. ChatGPT's in the car. Bloomberg just put a chat tool on top of their earnings call thing and their whole Bloomberg chat thing. And Epic and Microsoft last week announced Epic, the massive, biggest, EHR, electronic health record vendor in the country, written in mumps. For those of you who remember the old AI languages, anyway, Epic is written in mumps. And is now combined with Microsoft's acquisition of Nuance, and they have ambient collection of doctor notes. So we hope to get to the point where the doctor doesn't have to sit there behind a computer and type everything in while they're talking to you, but can actually get picked up and then recorded, and then from recorded to DRGs, diagnostic related groups, from DRGs to payment, right? Which is a huge issue if you know that business. So here we have, basically the dinosaurs, the elephants, and they're putting this stuff not in some store 8, which Walmart just closed down, their innovation center, kind of hacking around, but they're putting it into mainline capabilities. And that to me is very different. So the first question I have for you folks, and if folks could put their answers in the chat, it would be great, which is, how much have you personally and do personally use these tools? 0 hours a day, 0 to 1 hours a day, 1 to 3 hours a day, more than 3 hours a day. And I'm talking about a work day. So I'd like you to think about that. What do you personally do? Do you use this? And then the second question I'd love the answer to is, where are you? And I'll get at the end of this presentation to a benchmarking thing, but where are you in terms of use of ChatGPT or other generative AI tools in the enterprise? None at all. Kind of experimenting, hacking around, giving it to the innovation folks to play with, having a legit pilot, having something in production, and having more than one thing in production. And by the way, the outside stats, according to a recent survey, say that 60% of companies have stuff in production, 60 plus have stuff in pilot, and just under 5% have things in production as of about 6 weeks ago. I just want to share another couple stats with you. PwC just came out with their global CEO survey. When I was at Pricewaterhouse, I used to oversee that, and it's a pretty well done survey. And I didn't invent it, so I'm not claiming for myself. There was, whatever. I have lots of opinions about research, as you might imagine. The idea, they say that 43% of CEOs believe that generative AI will decrease labor costs in their organizations. Over 70% have some AI implemented already, and 45% of CEOs believe that within 10 years or less, their current business model will not be viable, that they will have to transform themselves. I found those some pretty stunning statistics in terms of what's going on. I don't know, Toby, if you want to say anything, or if there are folks, if there are questions in chat that people have.
More than a couple in production is pretty interesting. Eric Schwimmer, I don't know if you want to offer maybe what you've learned in that. Let's see if I can turn you on real quick. I think that those that actually have things in production, the question is, what have you learned that perhaps we could all learn from? I don't know, Eric, you're there. Maybe you could share something. I've turned you on.
All right. Well, as we hear Eric, sounds good.
Now you can hear me.
There you go.
Excellent.
So a few things I've learned. And by the way, I'm with Bloomberg, so we're part of your initial slide. We have multiple applications out there. A lot of it is in beta at this point because we're trying to get customer feedback and understand make sure we're really solving the problem that we're after. What we've learned along the way is putting in place the proper frameworks to enable governance up front.
Yeah.
Trying to retrofit that, this all sounds like pretty much common sense, is difficult. We've spent a lot of time on that. And as an engineering leader, I think it's important, at least in my opinion, that you be involved in that. Don't outsource that to your legal team, or you may not like what you get.
Right.
So that you can create a pragmatic process. The other is that models are changing and evolving constantly. There is no one size fit all for this. It depends on the task you're after as what you're trying to solve as to which model is best. And the only thing I can tell you is that what we've seen in the last year is that change is constant and will continue to be so. So we're planning on that so that we can build frameworks where our models can be relatively easily shut out and changed. And then the last thing I think is don't underestimate the importance of prompt engineering, because it's, again, common sense when you think about it. Garbage in, garbage out, right? So there you go.
Explain more on the prompt engineering. Do you have the right tools you need? Do you have the right resources you need? Is this a new skill set? I mean, how do you build prompt engineering into an excellent capacity, I guess?
So I don't know that I know what excellent looks like yet, but what I can tell you is what we're doing is I think everybody's learning on the go. It's much like any other type of query language. You just need to learn the nuances, and each model has slightly different ways of interpreting the prompt to gain the same output. So, for instance, Anthropic's syntax is much different than OpenAI's.
Yes.
So just, what we're doing is we're creating a center of excellence to understand all this, but at the end of the day, we need to educate our engineers because that's the people who are building applications.
That's so interesting, Eric. And that whole notion of making sure you don't get vendor lock-in to a particular kind of model, because if you don't plan it up front, boy, it is so hard when if you have that prompt library or vector database, and then you try to bring it over to another model, you're at least as locked in as any operating system. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a classic technology choice. Everything has a lock-in at some level, but we're so early in the innovation curve. Things are changing so quickly. Yeah, as flexible as you can be is probably the best strategy.
So let me just pile on to Eric a little bit. I've got 3 startups that I'm an advisor, investor in that have, and some of them are a little further down the line than Nicole, startups that have 3 production Gen AI things that are live that have had huge impact to our customer base and great value. The technology is not as hard as you think. This is not, some giant Gordian knot like implementing SAP 10 years ago, or, doing, multi-layer deep learning AI. If you have a qualified technologist, it's actually pretty quick and pretty easy. The hard part, I think, for IT is selling the idea that and it's getting easier and easier with more boards being involved in this, selling the idea that you have to get on the field, you have to get your hands on this. As Eric said, this is changing fast. It is radically different, even though it's conceptually pretty simple. You get good by being on the field, not watching somebody else play, and being comfortable with doing that as you're figuring out your governance structures, as you're figuring out the changes to your target architecture, as you're having discussions with the business about strategy and the new things that are possible, sort of, fixing the plane in the air kind of thing. But I think it's I think it's going to be an absolutely huge, a huge set of impacts, along with 8 other big change waves that are all happening right now.
Hey, Carl, I turned your mic on just under the premise that you've got some features that you're moving into pilot, but particularly your notion about working with bigger vendors like Salesforce and ServiceNow. What can you share about how you're approaching some of these, let's say, more traditional vendors and their role in your AI journey?
Yeah, I think they all obviously have their own AI and chat GPT strategies. So, we were involved with them early on when all of the big announcements started happening to sort of probe on these things. And we picked a couple of use cases that we thought were worthwhile and did some pilots, which ended up having good results. And so we drove those forward to scale them up. And now we're sort of on to the next layer of opportunities and looking at what some of those might be in areas beyond the help desk and marketing, which is where we started.
Yeah.
Great.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so interesting too. Scott was saying that there's a bunch of individual contributors that aren't being reported in the AI statistics, and that can cause a problem, whether it's data leakage or other kinds of issues. And I would totally agree with that, Scott. Can't tell you the number of times we talk to folks who say, "Look, our organization has this locked down, but I use it at home and email it to myself. It's just nuts."
Hey, I wonder if I can ask Tom Peck to chat as well, and maybe John, this is an opportunity for you to react, and Carl as well, maybe share some best practices. So lots of noise, lots of vendors, lots of users, confusing terminology. I think we've definitely created a hype cycle here. So Tom, I don't know if you want to share a little bit of your point that you're making about too many going on, right?
Sure. Hello, Gamil. Tom here. I'm the CIO at Cisco Foods, $80 billion food distribution company. A couple of quick thoughts from me. We don't have an AI strategy per se. We have an automation strategy, of which AI and generative AI are tools within a toolkit. So that's kind of point number one. Our approach and philosophy is we want to do things first with basic automation workflow, robotic process automation. Then we would progress to leveraging AI or generative AI native within tools like Salesforce and ServiceNow that somebody else alluded to. It's only after we haven't solved use cases or business problems with our existing tools or native SaaS tools that we would explore building or buying AI or generative AI. For us, we're using a lot of traditional data science and AI for routing of trucks and upselling and cross-selling and helping our restaurateurs. But natural language processing, curating menus from pictures and things like that is a big opportunity for us. But it's the market's a little confusing out there because you want to avoid vendor lock-in. We're trying to pick the best tool for the best use case. And a lot of our partners, our vendors are rebranding stuff as generative AI when arguably it's traditional AI that's structured data within the traditional database. We all know that generative AI is much more unstructured large language models. And I think that sifting through the hype in solving use cases with more traditional tools is the first thing we should focus in on. And then only then would we go to generative AI build versus buy. But I think sifting through the noise and not spending money, time, and talent on things that you can do with alternative tools is your first option. Back to you, Gamil.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Yes, thanks, Tom. Yes, Tom, I used to be on the board of Alliant Food Services before we sold ourselves to Royal Ahold. And, Cisco is one heck of a competitor, boy, I'll tell you.
But John, you get this question a lot, I presume, where that how do you cut through the noise? And Todd Massa also said, the technology is hard, but change management's even harder. The process, cultural change. I mean, you're talking about these elephants dancing here. How do you get an elephant to dance? What is the leadership function that a CIO should be taking right now?
Sure. Well, first, I think you need to understand the environment and that the noise is not going to go away in the push. And I'll get to a framework we call the WINS framework, and then some ways to think about actions. Now, the context, and as CIOs and technologists, you probably understand this, but a lot of people don't understand that if you take if you look at the market capitalization of the top 6 players in AI. It is 10 as of the end of October, 10.1 trillion. Put that in perspective. The gross domestic product of Japan and Germany combined is 8.6 trillion. So the amount of dough that these folks have, and this is critical to them growing their businesses because it allows them more ongoing revenue. It allows them the ability to grab hold of more of the stack and so forth. And I have to laugh when people say, "Oh my goodness, Microsoft is burning so much money on, OpenAI." Well, Microsoft generates just under $2 billion of EBITDA a week. And if you look at the total EBITDA of the top 6 AI companies in 2023, it's $428 billion. To put that in perspective, the Russian government collects something like $350 billion in taxes. Okay. So, I mean, this is not going away. This is central to their strategy. So it's, it's important to remind people and also to get perspective. Yeah, oh, $600 million valuation. Paul and I were talking to an organization that has just raised about $600 million to build some models. And we said, well, what are you going to do when you run out of money? Because, that's 3 days of EBITDA for Microsoft. Okay. So Camille, this gets at, your question about what do we do? How does an organization think about it? What we found, and this is an article, the references here, and of course we'll share these slides and so forth. This is where should your company start with generative AI? It's an article we published in the Harvard Business Review back in September, and the basic idea is to try to make this compatible for executives and to look for where things are, because what's intelligence, what's AI, what's simple work, 20% of this, whatever. What we did is we said, look, think about a new category of work that's a subset of knowledge work. So, when you think about it, a lot of people are knowledge workers. My plumber's a knowledge worker, my heart surgeon, my lawyer, but they're all not going to be affected the same amount by AI and generative AI. So what we did is we said, think about work when the core of the work is 4 things: manipulating or creating or improving words, images, numbers, and sounds. That's words, images, numbers, and sounds. What we call wins. So yes for a lawyer, no for a heart surgeon. Okay. So that's the first question. And of course, this is where, as we were talking about before, marketing is in here, software development is in here, and so forth. Then you say, all right, how much of that work is already digitized? So in my old employer, PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, they are what we call here in the crucible. Pretty much all of their work, give or take, is wins work. And pretty much all of it is digitized. So you're going to see massive changes in the core, whether it's the tax part of their business, the consulting part of their business, or the audit part of their business. It's going to be fundamentally transformed, we believe, in the next 3 to 5 years in terms of the relationship between capital, labor, and productivity. You're already seeing it in some offshore firms that we're talking to. We have clients pushing on offshore vendors to get lower cost supply, because they think that they're already using these tools and the cost, for the functions they're delivering offshore should be less. And then you have folks who are holding, and so who's in the crucible? Education. This is why you see, Hollywood, striking and so forth, right? Because a lot of what Hollywood does is up in the crucible. And then you have stuff, in the other extreme, in the balcony, okay? These are folks who are just kind of watching what's going on. Not a lot of things are digitized. Not a lot of things are wins work. So big parts of Cisco's business, I think, would be like that, right? Operational intensive, thin margins, hugely difficult. Automation important, but it's not in the core. Then you have folks holding a lever. So you look at things like pharma, biopharma. They're looking now and they believe that they can, according to some of the new models, they can explore 10, 100, 1,000, or 10,000 times as many potential molecules in R&D development. Folks like, oh, come on, the guys who did the vaccine with Pfizer, starts with an M. Anyway.
Moderna.
Yeah, Moderna. So Moderna's got a new model now. They can do 10,000 times as many, potential molecules and solutions as they explore that space. So the core of their cost base is not, wins work, but man, the wins work, if they get it right, is phenomenal. And then next in line, some folks will do it. And we're seeing a lot of private equity folks. One particular company that we're familiar with in the crucible, it's a medical coding company and so forth, and they've got about 12,000 employees, and they've just flat out said, the management of the folks that we're talking to, the owners have said, look, we expect you to use this stuff to take a quarter of the company to a third of the company out of here in the next 18 months.
So these are some pretty fundamental edits or transformational sort of themes. It feels like, though, a lot of what we're hearing is Copilot is being applied to, let's say, traditional back office work, software development, customer support, HR, marketing. It's sort of setting the new table stakes. This is how you should do HR going forward. But it's not fundamentally transforming the business. It's not, it's improving productivity. It's giving a gift to the CFO. You're suggesting in the crucible, if I've got digitized PwC data, et cetera, might I create the consulting of the future organization at a wholly different cost model, wholly different workflow, wholly different customer experience? That's some pretty scary stuff, John. How do you get to that?
Well, I think traditionally what happens is that you've got three things going on. You will have some small population of the existing companies will adopt this aggressively and force their other competitors to join. I mean, usually industries don't move wholesale, right? You have the leaders, and there's also data in the PwC report which combines with this, which is what you'll see happen. For example, let's just take the big four because I know them pretty well. My prediction is one or two of them will aggressively adopt this stuff, and they will not only win more in the marketplace, but they'll be able to pay their people more. So they will have, if the amount of profit in the industry available is 100, I think that number may stay the same, may go down a little bit. But the thing is that, let's say today it's split pretty evenly among the four. What's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years is the leading company, the two leading companies are going to garner 60, 70, 80, 90% of the profitability available in that industry. So I think that's the first thing you see. The second thing you see is you see a new model enter. Like you see Harvey now working with that UK, Harvey's the generative AI, learning thing, working with the UK firm that's doing, contract negotiation using generative AI, and they put it across all their different folks. So you're going to see a newfangled law firm come in, a new entrant, and they are going. But that's why we put 3 to 5 years. It takes a little while before the market realizes this new model is viable. If you go back in history and you say, when were taxi medallions in New York worth the most? And the answer was 5 years after Uber was founded. 5 years after, taxi medallions in New York traded for $1.2 to $1.3 million a piece. 12 months later, they traded for $34,000. Okay, so it takes a little while for the market to believe it. But once they do, there's massive financial disruption, not market disruption, because the taxis are still all around New York City, but nobody put money in them. So that's what happens in industries. When somebody sees the new model come in, when Amazon gets to a certain size, Macy's gets marked to market way down. Now they stay around as a zombie for a long time, right? And they gobble up other zombies trying to stay alive, but they're gone. And no talent goes there, no capital goes there, no good technology goes there, and so forth. So they just keep going farther behind. That's kind of the second thing.
Let me add something to that, because I spend a lot of time with boards on exactly this issue. And it's the companies that saw the new technology or the new weapon systems and said, okay, how would I design my company from scratch with this new stuff, change the model versus I'm adopting it and I'm changing. And a lot of times it's people who are outside that industry doing it. And what it creates is better asset utilization, better customer experience, better controls, cheaper cost structures. And look, in business, if I have those things, I kill you. 1912, 400 car companies in America. 10 years, 15 years later, there's 40, and 3 of them have 80% of the market because they took the new technologies and changed the model. So the ability to be eviscerated and drop out of the S&P 500, that should scare folks. And we haven't talked about board fear. I think from the board on down, there should be some fear that if you're not moving fast on this, you're going to be left behind.
And we're seeing a lot of that kind of board fear in the work we're doing. We just the past 2 weeks, we've helped a bunch of folks either create board presentations, do board presentations, and so forth, because boards are asking about this, whether they're in a holding a lever folks in the crucible. That's where the thing. Satish just said the technology lends itself to be industry agnostic. Any company that has access to data, modern development practices, and courageous mindset can be reimagined and progressed. I do think that is true.
Yep.
At the same time, I think there are some folks that are more dangerously impacted. I mean, the unions in Hollywood were able to get a 5-year moratorium using AI to write stuff. Good luck with that. It's going to come from Bollywood. It's going to come from every other friggin' place. Not going to happen. The unions are going to drive themselves into the ground. What they should be lobbying for is, how do the studios have to give us open source access to all kinds of stuff, great compute power, training. They should be going the other way. They should be saying, look, we want to be working for Henry Ford. We don't want to be working for Stanley Steamer, right? We want to be working with the companies that are going to win. If I run a union, but whatever.
But
yeah.
walk through. You mentioned you're sitting at a board conversation. They're quite eager and perhaps urgent, to Toby's point. If you're CIO, you have the center of excellence. You have the capability. You understand the data. You're working on RAG skills, prompt engineering. You understand architecturally what we have as digitized data and don't. But we don't necessarily, the CIO, don't necessarily have the full power of the board to change the business, to disrupt the business. How do you take that leadership? How do you push this forward?
Well, I think a really important thing is to remember, and I'll go through these and share them. Remember that, you live this day in and day out. This is one of those things that's happened so quickly, and it's, as Eric was saying, it's so early in this market that the hype, you said as well, Camille, the hype cycle's ahead of this and so forth. There is reality going on, but man, there's a lot of hype. The other thing is that this is one of those things that, more than any technology I've ever interacted with, and I've been around this with executives, this is one where people who have absolutely no experience with the technology have incredibly strong opinions. So they're absolutely clueless, and once they opine, they can't get off the stage because they don't really know what they're talking about, but they feel very strongly about it. And that's a really dangerous thing to have to deal with. So that's why we say, if you want to be in the top quartile of folks that we deal with, our review of the board of directors about what it is, and make sure you go to speed or assume nothing about their understanding. Second, CEO VPs must personally spend at least 3 hours, personally using this stuff and using it on something that matters to them. Doesn't necessarily have to be the business. Could be planning a vacation, could be whatever, doing a personal health routine, just so they can understand and use this stuff. Someone mentioned before, assessing the legal and IT risks. Absolutely. Assign somebody with Gen AI coordination. And then we talked about in the chat, we talked about lots of people using this. You need a basic employee use policy and train at least 100 employees. So if somebody like the Travelers, they give you access to tools, but you have to show that you've taken the training. They've trained over 3,300 new people at the Travelers Corporation because they think, AI and generative AI is so central to what they're doing. Build a zero-risk chatbot. Take stuff that is non-proprietary, non-sensitive, and just at least get people understanding what it's like. And on this call, you have lots of people who have experience, but there is a way to get started with zero risk, because the kind of issues that you understand early on are different than when you're actually in production. And then another thing is, yes, have this centralized effort and so forth, but fund the rebels. Think like the CIA. Fund the rebels. Who are the people who are willing to take the personal risk? And this, we have found, your best people are going to want to learn how to do this, because anybody who understands this stuff understands AI is not going to take your job, but as they say, somebody using AI is going to take my job, right? Because when you think about it, every individual is a team, and every team is a team of teams. So, the smart consultants, the smart scientists and so forth, they're using this stuff as a lever. We think of it as, imagine walking into your house and you saw somebody in the front hall, you hired an electrician to put in some new plugs. And that electrician was sitting there with a hand drill, like, remember the old hand drills? And putting holes in the wall. That's what people are doing for certain kinds of work. Like, if you walk in and somebody's doing, responding to an RFP, or writing a marketing email, or creating, an ideation session, and they're not using this stuff, they're sitting there with a hand drill. And smart folks know that. The better folks know that. And then this whole notion of creating a process for a portfolio in terms of horizon 1, 2, 3, make it work. So I don't know if this completely answered, but these are the kind of things
Yeah, I mean, this is a good short list here. And I wonder, Chris Barban, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, your comment about sort of what I consider sort of the democratization of these tools. They're a little easier to use. Perhaps you can lend to your comment that you put. And then Alan Fazio, I want to hear you talk about the culture of innovation. So.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Yeah, so, I think a lot of the focus and spotlight over the last couple of years, last year especially, has been on ChatGPT. But I think, what's kind of flown a little bit under the radar that I've seen is the advancement of the major players and vendors in the industry creating low-code ML capabilities that bring the ability for IT organizations to deliver these kinds of capabilities to the business to a much lower bar, right? So, before you'd have to build out this enormous amount of data pipeline and infrastructure and a data lake. You'd have to have data scientists come in, high-paid data scientists on your team that understood how to, that understood statistics and algorithms and write all of the code necessarily to train these models. They would have to, have enough knowledge to understand when to choose which particular machine learning technique to use. A lot of that stuff has been abstracted now, right? I mean, you can go to any one of the major cloud platforms and sign up for a free account and get access to a bunch of.
Does that create for you, Chris, too many use cases, too many experiments? And if you're in a leadership role, do you need to focus on the very few that matter, or how do you manage that?
Well, one of the big challenges that we're finding is that business users don't know what to ask for. They've never had the option of having AI applied to their business use cases. So if you're an IT organization, you're sitting back waiting for someone to come tell you, like, hey, I need you to build me an ML model. They're not going to do that. Right, so an IT organization has to have the ability to do rapid prototyping, and so the way you do that is you leverage some of these low-code capabilities. You pick a use case, and and you go and you prototype something, and you go to the business and you show it to them, right? And then you don't turn the prototype into production. You take what you learn from the prototype, and then you go build something in production with a solid use case and KPIs behind it, right? And so now IT organizations have the ability to do this kind of rapid prototyping and then go to the business with solutions and get the gears turning, right? And get them excited about it. And then that's when you start to kind of open up a partnership that makes sure that IT is building what the business needs.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Alan, I know you've been a big advocate of driving innovation, certainly within the IT leadership role, but across the organization, how do you leverage this? I mean, what have you learned about, innovation's often the overhyped word, but how do you turn it into reality? I guess.
Yeah, because I think, listen, everyone on this call is going to figure out tools and pilots, and we'll figure out the technology. This is a different game. This requires the organization to be in innovation mode, which it hasn't been in for 30 years. I can find 100 young people who want to use this tomorrow, letting their managers give them time to try, to fail. And if we think we're going to come up with a pilot that's the home run, we're kidding ourselves. It's going to be two people who you hire next year who come out of college, who did their senior paper with these tools, who's going to find a use in your business that transforms capabilities. And you've got to figure out how to capture it and spread it across the organization like wildfire. And we're not built for that anymore. A lot of our folks who have been through the last 30 years, they've lost the muscle for innovation. A lot of companies take an idea, hammer it into concrete, and wait for fruit to come off the plant. And that's not how it works. So I'm spending as much time with the business on how to deal with an innovation infrastructure as I am trying to figure out the technology. And that's the thing that worries me the most. And the last slide, hits on a lot of it. But I don't need an AI champion. I need an ice-breaking ship. Someone's got to go change the behaviors and have the authority to say, we're going to do some things differently because we don't know where the value is, but we're sure the hell going to find it.
Alan, I couldn't agree more. It's so interesting because another Alan, that one of the great privileges of my life is that when I was at Diamond Technology Partners, somebody who's on our board of directors and did a lot of work with us was Alan Kay, the inventor of object-oriented programming, first employee at Xerox PARC, and so forth. And Alan used to get so frustrated. He said, if you have commodity tools for knowledge work, you'll have commodity results. And he used to say, look, if you really want to do something new and innovative, sometimes you have to go down into the hardware level. And I think that, I've been in and around the business since, about 1983. And this is the first time since then that we're going, just what you said, we're looking at, hey, we're not just going to use the vendor tools and so forth. We're going to make some stuff ourselves. And, we're not just going to use the existing hardware, but the vendors are going deep into the hardware stack. NVIDIA's going up into the software stack. We're going to post-von Neumann machines. I mean, we got all kinds of stuff happening that we haven't seen happen since list machines were hanging around. You know what I mean? And you're too young for that, but I'll explain it to you later.
So let me pile onto that, because John's right. Alan, one of the just world-class geniuses, Alan used to say context is worth 80 IQ points. And so that's again about getting your hands on this thing and really understanding it with context. What a lot of people don't understand about that simple phrase is lack of context is negative 80 IQ points, right? And so which one of those do you want to be? But to the earlier point, a lot of companies will fail. And one of the reasons why blank sheet innovators going, whether it's Standard Oil or Sears or Uber or the Prussian military in the 1860s that said, hey, we're going to rethink this thing with a blank sheet of paper. One of the reasons that works is you don't have the cultural behavioral problems that were just mentioned a little while ago, right? Mass innovation inside a company, you have to ask one simple question. How good are we at rewarding people for trying something and screwing it up? Because that is the nature of innovation. A bunch of it is stumble around, kind of work, didn't get it, I'll try it on the third time. That sort of behavior normally gets punished at companies where they have these wonderful monthly ops reviews of plan versus action that comes down from the board. So if you don't have a culture that can broadly reward that stumble around innovation thing, it's going to be very, very hard, very, very hard for you to get there.
Yeah, that was interesting. Richard quotes the late, recently departed Clay Christensen in terms of reinforcing the existing business model, versus doing something that disrupts it. And absolutely true. I mean, the ability, businesses will waste hundreds of millions of dollars on familiar things and get furious about wasting $1 million on an unfamiliar thing. It's nuts.
Rich mentioned something earlier on that I wanted to hit on. I think the biggest danger with Gen AI is it's going to make people in companies think very short term and very, very narrowly about technology. There's no success scenario 3 years out where you're not good at Gen AI. There just isn't one, whether that's engagement or cost structure or product or experience. But if you're not also paying attention to the massive leaps forward in scale AI, embodied AI, federated AI, real-time AI at the edge, and the 15 other change waves going on at the same time, and you're not paying attention to human capital management and human capital optimization and supply chain, you will not win in that world. The thing that Rich mentioned earlier, this is the other thing, that there's a drilling for oil component of this, right? The oil for Gen AI really isn't the big giant public data sets. Everybody can get to that. But inside a company like PwC or KPMG or Cisco, it's the total expanse of knowledge, every bit of data exhaust you could fire off from a project, being able to mine that and Gen AI that, and having a continual pumping system that pumps that oil into your databases. That's how you're going to make a difference. And I see very few companies that structurally get that all of that knowledge that they've got is a huge competitive weapon, and that continuous improvement part. Most of the AI projects that have failed, if not all of them, with the DoD over the last 20 years, is because they missed that continuous improvement human part of it.
Larry Fitzpatrick, I'd love to call on you. In the FSI world, you're talking about mitigation of risk. I mean, we continue to hear that while the data potentially is available, we've got auditability, explainability, hallucination risk, bias risk, et cetera. How are you attempting to deal with that. And I wonder if anybody else can weigh in on that. I mean, this is where we're seeing the primary objective around investment, opportunity of operations of data. Anyway, so I turn your mic on if you wouldn't mind sharing. Yeah.
Sure. The way we're thinking about it is that anything that's customer facing or would be put in the hands of somebody customer facing really has to be looked at pretty hard. And we've got, hundreds of years, or in the case of our company, 100 years of understanding the risk profiles. I look at it as like the cost X and the risk profiles Y of the way our business processes work. And when we look at Gen AI solutions, you can say, because they're non-deterministic, we can calculate a cost profile of X prime, which is probably super favorable, but we have no intuitions or experience with the risk premium of Y prime or how to mitigate that. And so what we're looking for is ways to avoid spending another 10 to 100 years figuring out like how to manage that risk down. And, I think just getting super smarter about how they work. But given that they're non-deterministic, then the question is, what do we need from a confidence perspective in terms of guardrails? Do we need to run production parallel for long enough? How many cases do we need to see? Just going through that exercise, I think we're still early days. I don't think we have a good answer. So right now it's anything that would influence a regulatory moment, which is largely customer facing for us, or decisions around credits, for example, right, where it's not explainable. Like we just can't go there until we have better intuitions and measurement around that.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. We are beginning to see sort of auditability down to a numbers level, red teaming, et cetera, as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned red teaming. I'd be interested to hear more about it from other people too, because we've talked to a number of vendors who are proposing like baking Gen AI into their platforms, and no one to date of the vendors that we've talked to has actually contemplated using red teaming on their own products yet. So now we're not working with foundational models. These are people trying to bake foundational models into their existing process.
Right.
Could I just say, Larry, I've heard a lot of people talk about the risk. That was the most articulate, nice description of what the problem is of anyone I've heard.
Thank you.
Scott, I turned your mic on. Scott Leslie, I turned your mic on. You made a point that essentially everybody's using it already. And perhaps maybe you can add more color to your comment.
Well, I just look at it in all the different segments of the business. Marketing is using it. Creatives are using it. People are using it for copy. The comment earlier about using it for email. So much of this is unregulated and unknown. And I'll actually go back to what Larry just said, the word guardrails. That becomes one of the most important things. It's akin to when the internet first came around, for those of us that remember that people using the internet to look things up instead of going to the encyclopedias on the bookshelf, right? How trustworthy is that? What are your sources? What are your sites? Today, we have Wikipedia as an assumed source of data. That's fairly reliable. But with AI, we have that added risk of who are you sharing your data with, right? So we see that different industries, if you look at someone like Hasbro that has had to put out statements about their use of AI in their consumer products, never mind the government industrial complex, how are information being shared? And when looking at things like attack vectors for potential warfighters, the idea that there are guardrails around this, I think it speaks to the risk. And that's where I see the people that are making money in it that aren't the gold miners. It's the people selling the shovels to the gold miners.
Yeah, good point. Satish, I turned your mic on. Two great points. Human in the middle constantly is what we hear amongst most production level deployments, meaning that's the risk mitigating process. But then I think your second point is really prescient as well. It's the sense that the governance model of prior application structure may not be the same. Can you explain?
Gamil, happy to explain that. But before that, I wanted to say hello to Toby from American Express days. He was one of the leaders that reached out, inspired, and instigated me to achieve greater things. So thank you, Toby. Good to see you again. What I would say is this is the evolution usage of this technology to advance your organization will not happen within the four walls of technology. This has to be by everybody, which includes your control partners, risk, compliance, audit, etc. So you have to educate them, help them understand they cannot govern Gen AI similar to how they govern the previous models that they have done historically. So you're not looking at the code, you're not looking at the data. You now have to govern outcomes. And the outcomes will be influenced by human in the middle. So for us, for our first use case, we took 60,000 outcomes and had our model governance group review that and say whether that violates any of the policies that they have, as opposed to monitoring and governing the Gen AI model itself. And that's what I meant by having a different mindset in how you leverage and advance Gen AI.
Yes,
Go ahead, John.
yeah, I just think it's, as you say, how you think about establishing risk and truth is going to get more and more complicated. And, I think we're going to have to, the thing is, people are so used to deterministic systems in IT, give or take, as we were talking about before, financial services institutions understand, I think, less deterministic risk better than many, but yeah, it's huge. And the other thing is that we just started in some of the commentary here. We're just so early in this thing. Every single phone manufacturer has an AI chip, whether it's Apple or it's Samsung or Qualcomm. I mean, this is going to be intelligence at the edge. It's going to be, and I think the whole notion, I think some people are getting there, but people are thinking about anthropomorphizing this, and are we going to have automated general intelligence in a conversation? No. We're talking to a mesh of intelligence that's already having a conversation. And that mesh of intelligence is going to get extended way more. I mean, Toby did a ton of this stuff when he was at Verizon, about how you can, when you have intelligence anywhere you want in a network, and that network can be anywhere, man, you got to start like really thinking differently. And so, I think that we have to get away from the AGI and all that other stuff. Forget it. We already have a beehive that's alive, and it's just going to get.
Hey, Satish, before I let you go, you've been experimenting and putting things into production. Anything you can share without sharing anything confidential that you're most excited about there at Ally?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it is confidential, but I'm not sharing the how. We are looking at an AI first audit. If you think about the audit function, they are not involved in developing any of the capabilities that we do from technology, but they're responsible for governing, reporting on it, not just internally, but to external regulators as well. How can we bring in Gen AI to explain code, to create flow diagrams, to create documentation that makes it anybody that is even a fresher, a starter in the audit group, to move like 10 steps forward in actually doing the job, not trying to understand what we've built, is going to be massive, and I'm excited about that.
That's awesome.
Complete
Thanks.
reimagining of the function.
Thanks for sharing that. And Richard Entrup, I've turned your mic on earlier. You shared some of the innovations there at KPMG, sort of to speak to the big four. Could you just share a little bit of that before we run out of time, and we're nearly at the top of the hour?
Sure. Can you hear me, Camille?
Yep, sure.
Yeah, great, thanks. Yeah, so we got in very early in 2023. We developed our own internal GPTs for all of our functions. So we've been using it internally and drinking our own Kool-Aid, if you will, but we're currently helping many clients with all kinds of really exciting and transformational use cases, from the obvious ones with copilots for app dev and SDLC, all the way through customer service, all the way through using these image creation tools to create new products in retail and others. So there's lots of real use cases, but as Toby and I think John mentioned earlier, this is not some big giant ERP transformation that you're going to have to ask for $100 million for. I mean, this is, you need to identify some real use cases that provide real business value. The other dynamic that's happening is also discussed is the governance model. It's funny to me, and I've been around, John, since '85, a little before you, after you, but to witness this governance hot potato at corporate, for me, having sat in the CIO seat and many others, is a bit confusing. I don't get it. Why the normal expected leaders, CIO, CDO, and others, would just jump at this opportunity to provide real transformational value to their organizations is just an interesting dynamic. I had the discussion with Shelley Palmer, who many of you know, earlier this morning. And boy, if you can just bottle up all of your data in your entire company, going back how long, and then be able to query it and create this savant of your company, who should own it, I guess, is the real question. And that's probably why this dynamic exists of governance. But companies need to figure it out and get on to the real work of leveraging this technology for all kinds of great use cases.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody. I want to be sensitive to the time that you've allowed us to spend with you today. So thank you all for spending time. I hope everybody stays warm in your cold climates that you're in. And we've recorded today's call. We'll share after the call here shortly this afternoon, the summary of the content, some takeaways, as well as the recording. So stay tuned to see that. Also, stay tuned for an invite for our next call that we're going to have. We're going to showcase some enterprise class ideas, really to continue the learning process around generative AI. Where's it being deployed? Who's using it and how? But thank you all for your time today, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.